What if your soul chose your family before you were born, not as punishment, but as a gift for your transformation? This question might seem uncomfortable or even absurd at first. We often associate family with affection, comfort, and care, not with turbulent environments or dynamics that deeply wound us. However, there's a broader perspective, a spiritual view that invites us to see beyond appearances. Within this vision, each conflicting relationship, each pain experienced within the family could be part of a carefully drawn map for our inner growth. Imagine that before descending to this plane, we were aware of which scenarios would best refine our souls, and we chose with deep wisdom the people and situations that would help us expand our light. If you believe in God's Word and want to spread it further, subscribe to the channel and support our spiritual journey with your like. For some, this idea is comforting. For others, it may provoke revolt or disbelief. After all, how can we conceive that we would consciously choose such deep pains? However, when we look at the spiritual traditions of various cultures, we discover stories and myths that speak of heroes who, before birth, already carried prophecies of challenges that would shape their character and destiny. Adversities appear as portals, tests that, if overcome, would lead to maturity and wisdom. Perhaps you, reading these words, are one of those chosen ones, born into a toxic family context, not to be punished, but to undertake a deep work of healing yourself and an entire lineage that extends over several generations. The invitation here is for you to remain open-hearted. Let's begin this journey of reflection, spirituality, and inspiration. This is not a light or superficial reading. It's a dive into the essence of who we are and the bonds that shape us. Throughout these pages, we'll walk through dense emotional landscapes, but also illuminated by insights that can bring relief, hope, and, above all, the certainty that there is meaning and beauty even in the darkest parts of our family history. The soul's choice and spiritual purpose, an artist, sculpting their own journey. Imagine an artist facing a massive block of marble. In their hands, the chisel and the will to create something beautiful and unique. Each stroke is calculated and yet full of mystery and inspiration. Before starting the work, they envision the final form in their mind. They know there will be moments when the blows will be hard, when whole pieces will fall, creating cracks and edges. Still, there is no fear, only the certainty that each fissure contributes to the manifestation of the intended form. Similarly, the soul that chooses its family nucleus does the same. It foresees the beauty that can emerge from chaos and trials, yearning for the manifestation of a fuller, more awakened version of itself. Thus, birth is not simply the result of chance or a biological lottery. In various spiritual traditions, there's a belief that we as souls actively and consciously participate in the decision of where and with whom we will incarnate. This prenatal planning is not done with the limitations of our human vision, but with a clarity that transcends linear time. At the soul level, we see each challenge as an essential part of the process of self-discovery, just as the artist sees in the raw stone the potential of their masterpiece. The light that can only enter through the cracks. It's through fractures, apparent flaws, that light infiltrates. This poetic expression suggests that often suffering is precisely the gateway to a broader understanding of who we are. When everything seems perfect and harmonious, it's easy to stagnate in comfort zones. But when we're placed in difficult situations, we're challenged to dive deep into our interior, where we discover strengths we didn't even know existed. It's in the cracks that the light of consciousness penetrates, revealing new aspects of our own essence and illuminating unexplored paths. Whether you're skeptical or not about the idea of prenatal choice, I invite you to consider a possibility. What if the pains of your childhood, the complicated dynamics you witnessed or experienced in your family, were somehow sculpting your soul for something grand? Not that we should romanticize suffering or ignore its traumatic effects, far from it. But we can indeed see pain as a catalyst for growth, a chance to seek help, to exercise compassion, to develop empathy, or to become agents of change in other people's lives. Soul garden metaphor. There's another powerful metaphor to illustrate this concept. Think of an immense garden where each seed was handpicked. You, as a seed, decided exactly in which part of the soil you'd like to be planted. Not necessarily the most fertile soil, but the one that, even being rocky, would ensure that your roots would become extraordinarily strong. In each stone, in each neighboring plant root that tries to steal your nutrients, is the invitation for you to stand firm, grow, and seek the sunlight with more determination. Thus, the spiritual purpose of choosing a toxic family is not to suffer for suffering's sake, but to fertilize the ability to overcome, learn, and flourish amidst adversities. The role of toxic families. The spiritual furnaces. It may sound paradoxical to refer to toxic families as spiritual furnaces, but this analogy can make sense when we consider the intensity of heat and pressure necessary to transform certain substances into something purer and more resistant. In alchemy, furnaces were instruments of purification and transmutation. The same can occur in family dynamics. A dysfunctional family, marked by conflicts, emotional or psychological abuses, can function as that cauldron in which the soul, as painful as it may be, finds the necessary fire to transform its shadows and manifest virtues such as empathy, compassion, patience, and resilience. It's not easy to deal with the reality of having parents or relatives who, instead of nurturing, hurt. Feeling alone, helpless, or constantly criticized can generate deep traumas. However, when we find a thread of light capable of giving meaning to this pain, when we realize that each episode of suffering can bring to light an essential aspect of our inner strength, something magical happens. It's like the process of polishing a diamond. The rough diamond may look like a common stone, but inside it is a jewel of incomparable brilliance. Thus, each painful experience can be a blow from the divine lapidary, removing the layers that prevent our light from shining completely. Suffering as a tool for spiritual polishing. The idea that suffering is not punishment, but a tool for spiritual polishing, can be a true key to liberation. We are educated to see pain as something to be avoided at all costs, but inevitably, life surprises us with challenges we didn't ask for. When these challenges come from within the home, from people who theoretically should protect us, the impact is even more devastating. However, on the soul's plane, this type of experience can be compared to intensive training, where all your weaknesses are exposed so they can be strengthened. Amidst family tensions, unique opportunities arise to exercise unconditional love, forgiveness, even if it's something done at a distance or within oneself, the affirmation of healthy boundaries, and the awakening to the importance of self-care. Each conflict, each discussion, can become a mirror reflecting a part of us that needs attention and healing. Despite the pain, many people who grew up in chaotic homes develop a deep sensitivity to others' pain and an extraordinary capacity to create heart-to-heart connections. They are therefore people who, even wounded, are capable of radiating light. The invitation to expand consciousness. Understanding the role of toxic families as an instrument of spiritual evolution does not mean in any way justifying abusive behaviors or denying the need for boundaries and protection. On the contrary, it is precisely this broader vision that can give us the strength to take concrete attitudes of change, whether seeking therapy, breaking cycles of violence, or learning to say no to what destroys us inside. However, to do this, we first need to recognize that there is indeed a greater purpose. And this purpose can be the spark that ignites our will to break destructive patterns and evolve from the difficult experiences we've had. Some say that family is the first battlefield where we learn to fight for our beliefs, our emotions, and our dignity. If you feel at war, maybe it's time to ask yourself, what's the hidden lesson in this battle? What is life inviting me to see? These questions can lead us to a state of presence and search for inner tools that, until then, we didn't know existed. Seeing the toxic home as a spiritual furnace means affirming that, despite all the chaos and wound, there's enough heat to ignite our courage to change, heal, and transcend. Generational cycles and the role of the chosen one. The wheel of toxic patterns. There's something deeply painful in recognizing that certain family patterns repeat themselves over generations. Perhaps your mother suffered emotional abuse from your grandfather, who in turn was raised in an environment of extreme rigidity and lack of affection. These patterns can take various faces: alcoholism, domestic violence, psychological manipulation, emotional neglect, among others. They keep spinning like a wheel, that only stops when someone has the courage to stand up and interrupt the cycle. Have you ever wondered why it seems that certain family curses perpetuate? From a psychological point of view, we know that behaviors and beliefs are often transmitted unconsciously. On the spiritual level, we can imagine that souls gather in the same clan precisely to play roles of mutual healing. As if each generation received an invitation to end old pains, but if refused, the challenge would pass to the next generation. This is where the figure of the chosen one comes in, the individual who, for some reason, awakens to this reality and decides to put a stop to it. It could be you. And this is, at the same time, a burden and a gift of inestimable value. The heir of pain and the bearer of light. Being the chosen one is not an official designation, but a symbolic archetype. It's that person in the family who suddenly realizes they need to heal, and at the same time feels that their healing reverberates in every branch of the family tree. It's not uncommon for this individual to be seen by relatives as different or rebellious. Perhaps you question traditions, values, and customs that everyone accepts without reflection. Or maybe you realize that your sensitivity is greater than the people around you can bear. This role, although it can isolate, can also be the key to the freedom of the entire group. On the spiritual plane, we can imagine that the one who breaks the cycle is like a beacon amidst the storm. With each step towards the light, they illuminate the path for others to follow. This doesn't mean that others will necessarily accompany your change, but it means that the possibility is there, available. And often, even if there's no explicit support, just the fact that you demonstrate that it's possible to live differently outside of toxic dynamics already begins to dissolve old beliefs. It's as if your healing attitude generated small cracks in the generational armor through which light can begin to enter. The healing of past and future lineages. One of the most touching ideas within this spiritual view is that, by healing yourself, you're also healing your ancestors and opening paths of freedom for future generations. Imagine that all suffering, all hurt and all limiting beliefs are stored in a kind of energetic record that crosses time. By healing, you send a wave of transformation that reverberates in this invisible file, alleviating the burden that your ancestors had to carry. Likewise, your descendants, if you have them, or even the children of your spiritual lineage, receive a lighter inheritance where the repetition of toxic patterns becomes less likely. That's why it can be said that being the chosen one is a great gift. You not only find a way for your own soul to expand, but you also make this path visible and possible for those who come after you. This process doesn't happen overnight. Often it involves crises, loneliness, and a determination to continue when everything seems impossible. But the strength born from this journey is something that no toxic family, no matter how destructive, can erase. Deep down, it's your light that triumphs. Reflection and self-discovery. The mirror of family relationships. Family is the first mirror in which we look at ourselves. The reactions of our parents and siblings, their looks of approval or disapproval, and the way they treat us as we grow up all shape our perception of self-worth. If this mirror reflects constant criticism, rejection, or violence, we can internalize the false belief that we are unworthy of love. On the other hand, if we are able to understand that this mirror is just a distorted reflection of our family members' pains and projections, we can begin to seek the true reflection within ourselves. Here, a golden opportunity for self-discovery arises. Ask yourself, what wounds of my family am I here to heal? Or more importantly, where do I still carry reflections of this toxicity within myself? Perhaps you realize that you repeat certain patterns in your romantic relationships, or that you have an immense difficulty in trusting people because of the betrayals and manipulations experienced in childhood. Identifying these echoes in our adult lives is the first step towards transformation. After all, we can't change what we don't recognize. The inner journey as a path of healing self-discovery is like exploring an inner labyrinth, full of dark corridors, dead ends, but also hidden treasures that can only be found by those willing to face the unknown. In this process, anger, sadness, melancholy, or even guilt may arise. These are legitimate emotions that ask to be welcomed, for they carry within them the seed of deep understanding. Each layer of pain hides a lesson. It can be the awakening of compassion for ourselves, the recognition of our ability to establish boundaries, or even the awareness that we don't need to repeat family stories in our own lives. Often this healing path implies seeking help, whether through therapy, support groups, spiritual practices, or the development of a deeper communion with nature and the divine. The search for this support is not a sign of weakness, but of courage. Courage to look inside and give voice to wounds that for so long were silenced or repressed. And, as you progress, you discover that part of your purpose may be to inspire others to do the same. The dance between wound and healing. We can visualize the dynamics of wound and healing as a dance. Sometimes we take 2 steps forward, recognizing patterns, learning to love ourselves, and then suddenly we take a step back, repeating a toxic attitude or reliving the feeling of abandonment. This dance is not linear, but it's totally natural. The important thing is not to judge yourself harshly when the step is backward, but to understand that it's part of the integration process. Each time we revisit the pain, we can do it more consciously, bringing more light to what was previously in the shadow. This dance between wound and healing is the very essence of being alive. We are beings in constant evolution, and this evolution demands that we oscillate between moments of expansion and retraction. When we face the toxic family not as a sentence, but as a challenge that our soul chose to make us masters of ourselves, we begin to see pain through a different prism. It ceases to be just suffering and becomes an integral part of our refinement process. Tools for healing and liberation. Self-compassion. Looking at oneself with gentleness. Self-compassion is the act of treating yourself with the same tenderness and understanding that you would offer a dear friend who is suffering. Many people grow up in environments where their emotions are invalidated or ridiculed. Over time, they come to believe that they don't have the right to feel, cry, or show vulnerability. Therefore, developing self-compassion can be a challenge, but it's indispensable. Look at your wounds not as something shameful, but as signs that you have survived something difficult and are here, strong enough to face and heal these hurts. Each time a critical thought arises in your mind, I should have reacted differently, I'm weak for still feeling bad, try to replace it with a compassionate speech. I did the best I could with the resources I had at the time. This simple exercise opens space for self-love to gradually emerge in place of relentless self-criticism. Practice of compassionate meditation. An effective method to cultivate self-compassion is compassionate meditation. Set aside a few minutes daily to sit in silence, close your eyes, and breathe deeply. Focus on bringing to your consciousness a painful memory, something related to the family toxicity that affected you. While holding this memory, intentionally seek to surround yourself in an atmosphere of welcoming. Imagine a soft light enveloping your body, like a warm hug, and mentally repeat phrases like, I welcome myself in my pain. I deserve love and understanding. I allow myself to feel what I need to feel. This simple yet powerful practice can gradually rewrite internal messages of self-criticism and self-neglect to messages of care and self-respect. Forgiveness and release. Forgiving to free yourself. The word forgiveness often awakens confusion. Some think that forgiving is absolving the other of their actions, as if everything they did was okay. This understanding is equivalent to ignoring the gravity of the wounds, and that's not what we're talking about. Forgiveness, in its deepest sense, is an act of personal liberation. You forgive not because the other deserves it, but because you deserve to live without the weight of resentment and hatred. These negative feelings act like chains that keep us tied to the past, perpetuating the cycle of pain. When we think about toxic families, forgiveness proves even more challenging. After all, if our tormentors were precisely those who should have given us love and protection, the feeling of betrayal is stronger. However, in this exact context, forgiveness reveals itself as an extraordinary healing tool. It doesn't mean that you're going to re-establish abusive ties or pretend that nothing happened. Forgiving is, above all, release. It's saying, I don't allow your toxicity to continue occupying my mind and my heart. This way you reconnect with your own power of choice, the power to say enough to the old pain. Releasing emotional cords. The analogy of emotional cords is useful here. Imagine each old hurt, each painful memory, connected to you by an invisible cord. Each time you relive hatred or desire for revenge, this cord strengthens. Forgiveness is the act of cutting these cords one by one, freeing yourself from the ties that keep you bound to a past that cannot be changed. You don't erase what happened, but you cut the chain that prevents you from moving forward. Release can also be practiced consciously. Some resort to symbolic rituals like writing letters of hurt and then burning them, or saying aloud in front of the mirror, "I release you and everything you made me suffer." The important thing is that it's an act done with presence and intention of liberation. Over time, you'll feel a growing lightness and realize that even if painful memories still exist, they no longer have the same power over you. Self-love and healthy boundaries, rediscovering your value. Self-love is often one of the biggest victims of a toxic childhood. When we grow up hearing incessant criticism or suffering physical and emotional violence, it's common to internalize the belief that we're not worthy of affection. Therefore, rebuilding self-love requires meticulous work to reprogram what was recorded in the unconscious mind. It involves, for example, looking in the mirror and saying to yourself, "I love and respect myself," even if at first it seems strange or forced. As you recognize your worth, you begin to question what you really deserve in your personal relationships. And it's at this stage that establishing healthy boundaries becomes fundamental. Self-love is not just a feeling, but also a practice. It's knowing how to say yes to what nourishes your soul and no to what harms or weakens it. The power of saying no. For those who grew up in a toxic home, saying no may seem almost impossible, as we were often conditioned to believe that our voice doesn't matter, or that we must submit to avoid conflicts. However, the exercise of no is one of the most powerful acts of healing. It communicates to the world and to ourselves that we have sovereignty over our emotional and physical space. Establishing healthy boundaries is also a way to honor your healing process. If you know that maintaining constant contact with abusive relatives triggers anxiety or depression crises, you can choose to reduce this contact or even suspend it for a while. Some people feel guilty for making such decisions, but often this is the only way to rescue their own sanity and dignity. Remember, loving yourself is taking care of yourself, and sometimes taking care of yourself means distancing yourself from sources of pain. The Chosen One's journey, the beacon amidst the storm. You've come this far, and if your heart is beating faster, it might mean that these words resonate with your own story. Being the chosen one in a toxic family is not an easy task. It's like being a beacon amidst a furious storm, where merciless winds seem to want to extinguish your light at all costs. But the function of a beacon is not to shine only on clear days. It manifests with greater intensity precisely on turbulent nights, guiding lost navigators amidst giant waves. If you feel weak or exhausted, remember, your essence was prepared for this. Not in the sense that you deserve to suffer, but in the sense that you carry within you the potential to find a path of healing, even if there's darkness around you. That's why the fire of your soul ignited at this moment in history. You're not here by chance. Each step you take towards the light, each wound you choose to clean, also illuminates roads for other people walking with you, even if they're not aware of it. The alchemist who transforms pain into wisdom. Another potent metaphor to describe the role of the chosen one is that of the alchemist. In the alchemical tradition, there's the search for the philosopher's stone, which would have the power to transform base metals into gold. In the context of the toxic family, you are the alchemist, and pain is the base metal. What will you do with it? Will you throw it away and try to forget it only to see it repeat itself in another form? Or will you choose to work with the raw material, heating it in the flames of self-knowledge until it transmutes into wisdom? Personal alchemy is a slow and often lonely process. It requires humility to accept that we are wounded and courage to persist in healing when everything around seems to want to pull us back. However, when the process is complete, you encounter an internal treasure, a deeper perception of who you are, the ability to guide other people on their own journeys, and an unshakable faith that, even in pain, there is a purpose. The alchemical gold is not limited to shining for ourselves. It radiates light that can warm wounded hearts, demonstrating that healing is possible. The silent influence and collective awakening. In many cases, the chosen one doesn't receive explicit recognition from the family. On the contrary, they may receive criticism, be seen as the rebel, the overly sensitive one, or even the ungrateful one. However, this doesn't diminish the power of their silent influence. Each time you refuse to reproduce a destructive pattern, you place a grain of sand in the process of dismantling the toxic cycle. Each time you choose self-care, you demonstrate to the generations that will come that there is another way to live. This is an act of silent heroism, almost invisible to the eyes of those who are stuck in old dynamics. But in the energetic web that connects us, nothing goes unnoticed. Your internal transformation reverberates, and suddenly, someone in the family who had never questioned these issues begins to reflect, begins to want to change, even if subtly. This is how collective awakening begins, with small acts of rupture, small sparks of light that, when multiplied, can ignite old patterns and make room for new paths to open. Examples, emotions, and deep empathy. To make these concepts more vivid, let's look at some fictional examples that illustrate how toxic family dynamics can serve as a catalyst for transformation. The case of Amy, from abandonment to compassion. Amy grew up hearing from her mother that she wasn't good enough. Whenever the girl got high grades, her mother pointed out some flaw, some failure. When Amy became an adult, she realized she lived in search of approval in her relationships, often getting involved with partners who criticized and manipulated her. Deep down, she believed she didn't deserve to be loved. One day, after reading about self-compassion, Amy decided to look at herself with more tenderness. She realized she was repeating in her relationships the pattern she learned at home. She then started therapy and writing letters to her inner child. During this process, she cried, felt anger, and even thought about giving up. But gradually, she began releasing the emotional cords that tied her to her critical mother, discovering that behind that toxicity was a woman who had also been criticized and invalidated by Amy's grandmother. Understanding this, Amy felt a kind of compassion not only for herself but also for her mother. She decided to forgive her internally, cutting the cord of pain. This release didn't mean her mother changed her attitude, but Amy changed. She stopped seeking approval where she would never find it and opened herself to healthier relationships. With this, the entire family dynamic began to shake, and some of Amy's cousins, inspired by her, also sought therapy. The case of Jack, breaking cycles of violence. Jack was raised in an environment of physical violence. His father, an alcoholic, took out all his frustrations on him and his mother. Jack's adolescence was marked by hatred, desire for revenge, and anxiety crises. In adult life, he realized that in moments of stress, he felt impulses of aggression, including verbal. Frightened, he sought psychological help, and during the sessions, began to reflect on the fact that he didn't want to become a mirror of his father. But at the same time, this seemed inevitable. With much patience and breathing and mindfulness exercises, Jack developed the ability to recognize his emotional triggers before they exploded into violence. He learned to talk about his pain, to cry, and to share what he felt. Over time, he realized that his greatest fear was not being attacked again, but becoming an aggressor like his father. By facing this fear head-on, Jack created new patterns of behavior based on dialogue and empathy. Today, he gives lectures in schools about domestic violence prevention, using his life story as an example of overcoming. By breaking this cycle, Jack felt as if he was not only freeing himself, but honoring his mother's memory and preventing his future children from going through the same hell. Raw emotions and the power of crying. In both Amy's and Jack's cases, there were moments of intense emotion, tears, and even cries of despair. Crying, which is often discouraged in toxic homes, swallow your tears, you're overreacting, revealed itself as a balm. Allowing yourself to cry is recognizing that the pains exist and need to be expressed, so they don't turn into diseases or even bigger explosions. If, throughout this reading, you felt like crying, know that this can be a sign of release, a way to release tension accumulated over years. Embracing the reader with empathy. If you recognize yourself in any of these stories, understand that the embrace is real. You are not alone. There are thousands of people worldwide treading the same path, seeking to transform family pain into learning and spiritual growth. You have the right to feel what you feel, to seek help, and to find your way of expressing this pain. Whether through art, writing, dance, or any other means that speaks to your heart. Powerful conclusion. You were chosen not to carry the weight of pain, but to transform it into light. And this process, as arduous as it may be, brings with it the opportunity to become someone capable of shining with unique intensity. There may still be a long way to go, with comings and goings, stumbles and reunions with yourself. But remember, each small victory, each new insight, each forgiveness conquered, is a spark that adds to so many others in the flame of collective transformation. The soul's choice to be born into a toxic family can be seen as a great gift, as it points to the fact that you have a special mission to break cycles, spread compassion, bring awareness to situations that seemed immutable. You are the artist who sculpts your own journey, the alchemist who transforms pain into wisdom, the beacon that illuminates amidst the storm. The final question that remains is, what will be the next chapter of your journey as the hero of your own story? The answer is in your hands. You can choose to continue the legacy of unhealed wounds, or you can choose to become a healer of yourself and potentially of an entire ancestral lineage. You can give new meaning to each tear, each offense, each painful silence. You can look in the mirror and recognize that, despite the cracks and fissures, it is precisely through them that the light enters that will guide your healing process. The end of this reading is not the end of your story. It's just the beginning of a new chapter. And it can be written with ink of courage, hope, and self-knowledge. Your heart, no matter how wounded it may be, holds seeds of love that can bloom at any moment. Allow your inner strength to sprout and transform the world around you, starting with the terrain of your own being. For deep down, every toxic family is just the stage for a great lesson, and you, the chosen one, are the protagonist who dared to face the challenges and emerge stronger, more whole, and more luminous. Move forward, nurturing yourself with self-compassion, practicing forgiveness and building step by step the temple of your self-love. In this walk, you will not be alone. There is a legion of awakened hearts spread across the four corners of the world who have also chosen to transform the flames of suffering into alchemical fire of wisdom. May this journey inspire you to open new horizons and be living proof that yes, being born into a toxic family can be, under the soul's gaze, a great gift. Onward, hero. You have the keys to your own freedom. At your pace, in your time, continue writing a story of healing that will echo for generations, past, present, and future. After all, you are the chosen one, and what you do with this gift is up to you alone to decide.